welcome to the Breakdown of Science. I'm Jan.
And I'm Maruf. Today we are diving into how sleep, work, and play are all part of the same system, and why skipping that 7 to 9 hours sleep window messes up more than just your energy levels.
Yep. And we'll be going back all the way to the Industrial Revolution to see how today's 40-hour work week came to be and how it shaped school and life schedules and what it's actually doing to our brains, moods, and bodies.
Yes, exactly. So let's start with work. Back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, labor activists, and even Henry Ford started experimenting with shorter shifts.
Yep.
So the idea was fewer hours, more productivity, fast 48 hours a week. Then they eventually settled it up on 40 hours per week.
Yep, and that's how they also ended up having the 2-day weekend. And back in 1938, and this is talking about the US, they passed the Fair Labor Standards Act and formalized that 40-hour cap, and which other countries followed up with their own legal laws and regulations. And with this, workers gained more free time and employees saw better morale and less turnover.
Exactly, but it all started with work, but it didn't really stay there, It even went to schools. So now the schools also adapted the same system. There's also a very interesting thing. So when the parents are working, the children are being supervised by some workers. They are working in the school, right? So that was the thing. So the children are not unsupervised.
Yeah. And the thing is, because the school schedules matched up with the factory times, that's where most sleep problems start. From multiple studies, we've known that teenagers actually need around, at most, 8 to 10 hours of sleep, but most usually get about 7. And for college students, which we are, that's even worse.
Exactly.
You usually end up getting around 6 hours of sleep on good days, and even though we just need 7 to 9, we are still not being able to match up with that because of how our system is set up.
And it has real consequences. Mm-hmm. So studies has shown that if you are taking less sleeps, then your grade could decrease by 3 to 6%. That's a lot. Maybe you are not getting a scholarship because of this sleep things,
And it is certainly a point of either anxiety and depression.
Exactly.
Increasing. And and as we were saying, the system doesn't disappear when school ends. With 1 to 5 employees now work over 50 hours a week, and which is being linked to 15% higher risk in anxiety and a 12% risk of heart diseases. On the flip side.
Yeah, on the flip side, so gig workers and unemployed folks, right? Mm-hmm. So actually it's me in the weekends, have irregular schedules that mess up with the circadian rhythms. So it makes it harder to fall asleep and maintain social stability. Whether you are overworked or underscheduled, who are not working at all, unemployed persons, it's a lose-lose. So you cannot do extreme in both sides. Neither you can sleep for really, really long, neither you can just not sleep.
Yeah, and so the bottom line is just school and work both feed into this 40-hour mold, and that mold is misaligned with our human biology.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a bit more in the psychology. So let's talk about lack of sleep actually does to our minds. So first up, when it comes to cognitive function, if you sleep less than 7 hours a night, your prefrontal cortex, so basically the part of the brain that's your decision making hub, which is more or less the frontal part. That's why it's the prefrontal, frontal part of it. Either way, loses about 12% of its activation. So it's less active in critical thinking, and as such, you lose details and understandings as the day goes on because of that lack of sleep.
Exactly. So, I mean, if you are straight up, like not asleep for 24 hours and more, so your reaction time slows down by drastically. So, by 20 to 30%. That's huge number, right? And also, I mean, that's a kind of legal drunk. So, you are drunk, but it's legal. So, it should be legal, right?
I mean,
Yeah.
So you're saying that this like slowing down to like 20-30%, that's equivalent to basically being drunk while like driving or something.
Exactly. So if someone has not slept for 24 hours, they should be legally not permitted to drive.
I mean, yeah, that could be something that can be looked into. I think more or less it's because that's a bit difficult to like regulate.
Exactly, but for the truck drivers, they are regulated. I think people they have to take sleeps.
I think that it is in their contract that they have to have at least 8 hours of sleep while traveling. If they have to travel across countries, and it takes over 24 hours, they have to sleep like 8 hours at least. And for some that are even like for shorter distances, they regularly account for like 4 hours of sleep while traveling to maintain this balance.
Exactly, they
and,
need.
So there's not just like a cognitive function. There's also like an emotion regulation part of it. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that's like mainly tied to like emotional response, is a lot more active, like about 60% more reactive when you're sleep deprived. Meanwhile, its connection. Well, the connection to the part of your brain that calms you down, it drops by 30, meaning you're much more likely to become aggressive and be misunderstood by people, and not being able to calm down and relax yourself to like your usual baseline reactivity.
Yes, you are exactly right. Not only that, also, sleep also helps to regulate cortisols. So let's talk about cortisols. Yes. So for our viewers, what is cortisol? So cortisol is a type of hormone. So what is hormones, right? So hormone is a chemical messenger that's secreted by one of the glands in our body, and then that travels through blood, and then it works wherever it need to work. So that's basically hormone, and cortisol is a type of hormone. So, and cortisol is really high when we wake up in the morning. So, and it gives you the boost for the whole day. Like you feel energetic when you wake up, right? And if you haven't slept, and if you have slept dead, so your baseline cortisol, the stress hormone, rises by about 15%. That means higher anxiety, more depressive symptoms, and more trouble managing stress in general.
And with that, memory also gets impacted. If you miss out on slow wave sleep, which is key for storing facts and information, you'll remember only just like 40-ish% less of what you actually learned. Like word pairs in a language test. And
Yes.
REM sleep, which is the part where you usually have the most activity and where most studies say that dreaming events happen. That part is also helps you learning new skills. That gets cut by 25 when you're REM deprived, meaning waking up just as in the middle of REM, skipping REM entirely, or waking up before going to REM sleep. This is what it means by being REM deprived.
Exactly. Also, like now we are talking about less sleeping, right? So what happens if we oversleep, right? And oversleeping is not harmless. So sleeping more than 9 hours a night, especially me on the weekends again, has been linked to slower processing speeds. Studies have shown by about 20% in older adults it happens. So it's not just about sleeping more, it's about sleeping right and sleeping perfect hours, not one day 5 hours, the next 9 hours.
And what about biology? Well, I've heard like people mentioning melatonin. What does that which is like the hormone that helps you fall asleep? How does that get
So
impacted?
exactly, you are also right. So we explained cortisol before. Melatonin is the same. Like it's also a type of hormone that's secreted by pineal gland in your brain, and melatonin, the hormone, it helps you to fall asleep. If you are on the computer for long hours, or if you are on light, then your body thinks that it's day, it's not night. So melatonin is not secreted by the pineal gland, and you don't feel asleep. So it's also important to not look at screens during the night time. Before sleeping, before 2 hours, you shouldn't look at screens. That can reduce the amount of melatonin which would be secreted.
Yeah, and it's been seen that it's the blue light that comes from most devices that is the main cause for lack of melatonin production. So if you actually have to use devices late at night when you have to start going to sleep, putting it in a blue light filter mode or just reducing the brightness significantly, also, while it's not the best thing to do, it does help a bit in medication. And one thing interesting about melatonin is that you would think that because we're dealing with like light, it also gets the secretion of melatonin begins also when like light touches your skin. But no, that is hardly the main way that melatonin gets produced. It's specifically when light is reaching your eyes. That is when melatonin firstly begins. And as we mentioned with cortisol earlier again, and also as we mentioned now, it should follow a steady daily rhythm. But this, again, as we were saying, it gets messed up when you restrict sleep. And after just 1 week of 5 hours a night, your evening like cortisols can spike by like 20%, and your body stays in stress mode much longer, meaning you won't be able to go to sleep on time, which again reduces the amount of sleep you're taking, and just becomes a feeding loop where it just gets worse if you don't get a grip on it and try to fix it.
Exactly, 20% is too much. I mean, you cannot sleep for sure at night.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand. So now we can also talk about growth hormone, right? Because sleep duration also has effect on growth hormone. Over 75% of it is released during the sleep. So less sleep means poorer muscle repair and lower bone density over time, and so basically less growth hormone, So that's not right? Yeah. That's not healthy.
Yeah. Growth hormone is what we use to, grow. Yeah. But it's also what impacts muscle repair. For example, when you go to the gym or you do exercises and you feel sore, the reason that your muscles the next day are healed up or you feel stronger the next day because of it is because of these growth hormones helping in that repair aspect.
Exactly.
And fixing you up. And these aren't the only hormones. There's also insulin sensitivity drops. And after a week of sleeping just 4 hours per night, for example, your body becomes about 15 times less sensitive to insulin, which does increase your risks for type 2 diabetes. And insulin production is what we use to degrade the complex sugars that we get from our food. And so with a lack of insulin, you won't be able to get the sugar from foods, which our body usually converts to the energy that we need for the day. Meaning you'll be gaining less energy in your body, more tired, less active, and it causes full-on system-wide effects.
Exactly. So what you are saying is if someone hasn't slept for some time, or maybe one day or something like this, then their body gets less sensitive to insulin. So in their blood, there will be much sugar, right? So there will be a sugar spike.
No, insulin mainly is happening in your gut.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where it gets secreted from the pancreas, which is an organ. And their food that goes through it, that's where it gets digested, and the molecules and mainly the molecules and proteins that get broken down get absorbed and go into your bloodstream, and then it gets spread throughout your system. With less insulin, there will be less of all those nutrients, not just sugar, but less nutrients in your bloodstream going to all the different tissue and cells that you need. And it especially is damaging for like muscles, because then they won't be able to maintain their growth, especially with a lack of growth hormones.
You're right, yes. So not only that, your nervous system has also some effect. Your nervous system also has some effect on that. So your nervous system also flips. Sleep loss raises your heart rate and reduces your heart rate variability. Okay. But sleep loss raises your heart rate and also reduces your heart variability. So basically putting your body in permanent fight or flight mode because your body doesn't have any other choice. That's bad news for your blood pressure, because it would be high then, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one thing is that with this like nervous system being flipped and your heart rate becoming more variable, it also impacts your circadian rhythm, which is the way that your entire body is able to coordinate its functions. So without a perfectly aligned timing system, everything starts to go out of whack, as we've been discussing so far, melatonin and cortisol and growth hormones and insulin. It just feeds into itself. It becomes, it's called a positive feedback loop, where one event causes more of that event happening. Doesn't mean it's not the positive feedback. It doesn't mean it's a good feedback. It just means that one leads to more of it.
Exactly. So just sleep duration can affect that many things, right? Because what you're talking about, positive feedback, positive low feedback. So if one is somehow not regulated well, others are all going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And your brain chemistry also shifts. Serotonin turnover drops by 25%, which affects mood, and dopamine receptors availability falls by about 7%. And just after one night of bad sleep, it messes with motivation and the reward processing. Dopamine is what your brain uses mainly for the reward. That's when you eat chocolate or something sweet. That's where the serotonin, dopamine comes from. That's why you feel happy when those happen. And these two hormones, when you're sleep deprived, they don't get released as well. So you feel more tired.
Mm-hmm.
You're not as motivated to do what you want to do. And again, going back, it feeds more into this feedback loop that we've been talking about this entire time.
Yeah. And
it's just something that you don't really think about if you're I'll just stay a bit longer because I want to finish this game, or I want to finish this show, or I want to hang out outside longer, or I need to study for this. Specifically our studies, not just between us, but between our colleagues and other classmates as well. We've constantly I stayed up till 3 a.m. studying. I stayed up till 4 a.m. studying because of one exam or another quiz or preparing for a presentation. And in the morning, after like 2 or 3 hours of sleep, we're like stressed out. Like, did we finish this? Did we understand this? Am I forgetting something? And we just go into this like crisis mode of like, what do we have to do? And it's something that you don't really go all the way back to, like, it's your sleep that's the issue. Maybe you go into it like much later on, but at that moment you're not like, oh no, I didn't sleep enough and that's why I'm a complete mess right now. But you go and say like, oh no, I didn't study enough, or oh no, I didn't motivate myself enough, which is more of a societal aspect of like, you didn't do good, even though this is more of a biological issue that's going on. And we have to put into place a proper scheduling of when we have to go to sleep, when we have to get to work, to the point where it aligns with our body. And we have like said that you need 8 to 10 hours of sleep for ones who are teenagers right now. For college students, we need like 7 to 9 hours. Those are average. The reason why we say 7 to 9 isn't because we don't know. It's because for each person, that specific number changes.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people can go with less sleep, some people can go with need more sleep, and it also depends on what time you fall asleep. You usually want to schedule it so that you get that 7 to 8 sleep, but you also have to align that with your body. Like a recent study looked into different age groups, seeing when their body feels tired, how long they sleep, and when they wake up. And they saw that for toddlers, for example, they fall asleep a lot earlier in the day, and as such wake up early in the morning.
Yep.
For kids, that shifts a bit. They can stay a bit longer during the day. They can stay up like almost 9 to 10 in the afternoon, and then being able to wake up at around the 6 hours when they have to get ready for school. But for teens, that's where it shifts the most, where their body is able to functionally stay up past 12 a.m., and be up to like almost 1 a.m., and then wake up later in the day. And then once you're in your young adults and more adults, it again shifts back to where you have to go to sleep earlier in the day to be able to fit with your circadian rhythm. And few studies that have looked into why at the point of teenage years we can stay so late up is because most think it's an evolutionary thing, where there's this small period of window where teenagers used to be completely unsupervised, where they could develop their life skills on their own of like surviving a short time, but it's something that can like build up after years of this happening, and that's why they're starting here.
Exactly. So you clearly described it very well, also formulated it really well. I mean, we are just talking about someone who has taken less sleeps for, I mean, we are talking about basically some hours in deep, I mean, who is waking up till 4-3, you know. But it's not only about those long hours, even less hours, 1 hour of delay in sleep. I mean, as you also explained, like how you should have a routine of sleeping at the same time in the days. But the problem is if someone doesn't have that, so for them, there's a problem. Every hour you late to go to sleep, there are some minor disruption in your sleep cycle, circadian rhythms, you know, and it can shift your internal body clock. So every day going to sleep at different times can change your circadian rhythm every day. I mean, it's it is definitely not good, and that shift changes how your genes regulate metabolism and immunity, you know. So basically 1 hour is one gene expression cascade. So that's pretty interesting to sum up the whole story, right?
Yeah, you can simplify it to that, like with 1 hour to one gene. It's not again exact 1-to-1, but that's how it looks from a general perspective. And so, stepping back a bit, we've built our entire social structure, our schooling, our work, even our daily routines of when to cook, when for breakfast, when for lunch, when for dinner, all of this around schedules that more or less end up ignoring what our bodies and brains actually need. We started to put we humans are very like pattern oriented people. We want to put things in neat, tiny little clean boxes, but biology is like, no. And wants its own fluidity. And once we try and we can generalize, but this generalization shouldn't be a golden standard for everything, especially for things that are related to your biological functions. It should be taken more fluidly and be observed more on a case by case basis and such. And because of this, our work schedule should shift to accommodate every employee's work schedule, of course, not to overuse this or abuse this, because that also has negative impacts, but to find a good compromise between being having enough sleep and being active enough at work, but also not ignoring your biological needs. And so we need to go back to the drawing board and try and figure out what we actually need to do to fix this.
Exactly. I completely agree on your point and what you have said. Like, it's not everyone has to come at 10 o'clock in the office, right? Someone maybe likes to sleep longer and someone likes to wake up early because it's their circadian rhythm. And the company cannot decide when to come for everyone, although someone likes to come later, and that can disrupt their sleep, so they can concentrate less in the work, right? And I also believe that there shouldn't be any fixed hours for every single type of works. The work we talked about before in the history where 40 hours a week began. So it was for factory workers, right? Then it was shifted to schools, then maybe other workers too. Nowadays, there are on many digital workers.
It's been like standardized for every work field.
Exactly. And it's not, I think, optimal, because in some works there are maybe more thinking and more use of brain, when maybe your brain cannot function for that long per day.
For example, there's also the fact that for us that are like biology students, we are more likely to go working to labs and stuff. And this 40-hour work scheduling doesn't really fit most experiments, because you would have to usually end up leaving your experiment half done and hoping things work out and nothing changes while you're not there to observe. Like, from testimonies that I've heard, most students that are like PhD students that are even PhD students that are working in labs, they wake up at 8, 9 and go to labs, and then don't end up coming home till like 8 or 9 in the afternoon, which is crazy. That's like well over 40 hours a week. But it's just not. It's something that our work field demands of us.
Exactly.
In one way, you can try and figure out a way to fix experiments so that they fit within the time frame, but it's difficult. And again, this is not just something that affects biology students with their labs, but also other sciences. And even outside of STEM fields, there's a bunch of other working positions that don't fit this 40 hours, because either there isn't enough work within a day to fit that full 40 hours, and you have to stretch it out by doing menial work that doesn't really do anything, or have work that goes 50 to 60 hours, and somehow you have to cram it all into that one work period. And that's not without your employees maybe trying to take advantage, or like saying stay late and you will be rewarded with like exposure, or this might improve your performance review next time, or whatever. We like just the fact that your boss can even like give this the sayings shows how this 40 hours doesn't really fit the way we need it to, because there isn't it's just not enough. It just takes too much.
Yes, exactly. It's not what you are saying. It's not optimized for everybody, right? And that's a real good work. I mean, that would need a revolution to implement it at workplaces. And I mean, sleep is not optional, right? It's a foundational. So when we treat sleep like a luxury, that costs show up everywhere, in your mood, in your memory, in your health, even productivity. When you get older, you came to realize what we have done with our body when we are not sleeping at times. So that's really a thing to think about now, when and what we are doing with our body, right?
And there's been some studies that have looked at different ways of scheduling either the work week or your sleep cycle to see which is like more like optimal. And from some of them are saying that we should keep like a 2-day weekends as it is, but just change when the weekends are. Instead of having 2 at the end of the week, separate it so that one is in the middle and one is at the end. So you'd have like 2 days of work, then you'd have a break, then another 3 days of work, and then a break. The reason they're saying this is because having a 5-day constant work schedule drains your like battery and energy slowly throughout the week without being able to properly recharge it. So by the time you're on like Saturday, your battery is completely like empty, especially for us that are like college or like younger adults and adults.
Yeah.
And so you take majority of Saturday with also majority of Sunday, trying to recharge this battery quickly and get ready for the next weekend, which usually ends up leaving you with less total energy than the last week, and this just persists. This study was saying that having 2 days of work empties your battery just a bit, with 1 day of rest fully recharging, and 3 days again just a bit, and then that next break also recharging it back up. And as for like sleep cycles, there's been studies talking about how instead of having just a complete 8 hours in the night, dividing it into 2 parts of sleep, where at one point we only have 4 hours, and the other part, then we have a couple of hours of work, and then again another 4 hours of sleep, and then again work. It's the same logic as the division for the weekend. During the day, now you have this big part where you rest up, so that for the remaining part of the day, you have the energy to continue working.
Exactly. Also, there are some concepts nowadays. Also, there are some companies that tried out 4 days working week, right? So there's also a problem in that, because I don't think it works for everybody, because there are 3 days off continuously and 4 days of working week, but it would also be 40 hours. So the thing is, you have to work more hours per day for 4 days, then you get 3 days off. If a type of work that needs your constant cognitive skill, I don't think someone can work for 10 days per day, 10 hours per day, and they can give everything into it. I think after 5 hours, everyone has, and study shows that after hours, people cannot give full of their cognitive skill into something, right? So this has also some same effect. Like if someone works in the factory, they cannot work 10 hours per day for continuous 4 days and then 3 days off, because it's a physical work. They need rest every day. They need time for their muscle to, relax. Exactly.
Reset, yep.
Also, we talked about like cortisol and growth hormone before too, right? So exactly, it's the same concept.
Studies have shown that continuous non-stop studying is, after a certain point of time, is actually negatively impacting our ability to be able to understand the material. And the recommendation is that for every hour of study that you do, that you take 10 to 15 minutes of a break to calm yourself down and reset your thinking. And then it depends on what you're actually studying, but it can go, that 15 is like the average, but it can go up to like 30 minutes of break depending. And this separation between each hour of studying helps you a bit better to consolidate what you actually learned.
Exactly. That's how there are many apps nowadays, Pomodoro techniques, So they are using this technique to build some apps or some timers, and it's working well. I think people are doing that. On YouTube, on other platforms, you can see they are using Pomodoro techniques, like taking, studying for some hours, then taking some breaks and studying again. So I think it is helping people.
And at the end of the day, understanding the science behind sleep helps us do more than just feel better. It helps us advocate for a system that work with our biology and not against it.
Yes, I think you summed it up pretty well, and it's also at the end of our podcast. So I think we wouldn't add anything else.
Yeah, there's nothing much else.
Yeah, nothing much to add.
I mean, this conversation can continue on and on, going into details, but for the main goal of our podcast, I'd say this is a very good place to leave off and let you guys have things to think over.
Thanks for joining on the Breakdown of Science podcast, everyone, whoever is listening.
And also, next week, we'll also be taking audience questions and answering any topics or phrases that you are hearing over and over in your everyday that you don't fully understand. You can ask us on Instagram, on YouTube, on Spotify. You can leave comments and interact there, where you can ask whatever questions you want, and we'll look into them next week. Thank you.
Yes, for sure. Thank you. Until next time, sleep well and breathing that you do.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.